Dr. Bartoli, can you talk about the kind of the emotional struggles that are happening internally when we're kind of confronted with race and we've been told maybe it's you're not saying it right or don't talk about it.
Right. So, as a white person, we also often are taught to be a good person and a thoughtful person and to be really fair to people. I think the saying, don't react to the way people look, but really look behind the skin is a way of saying, let's be fair, really talk about the person, not just what they might look like, and we're really hardworking. And so there we are. I remember even times in my own career where I'm trying to be a good person, I'm trying to be a good anti-racist white person that does the right thing in the right place, and then my colleague or Carl comes to me and says, what you did yesterday was actually racist, and let me tell you why. And I'm thinking, what? I was actually trying to do the opposite. I'm trying to be a fair person, a good person. And all of a sudden, I'm not really listening to my friend of color who's trying to give me feedback. I'm trying to justify that I'm a good person because I don't want to be a bad person. I'm not a bad person. And so the whole topic gets sort of co-opted by my attempt to prove my goodness. It has nothing to do with what's actually
Hmm.
happening. And so one of the skills that we need that we're not usually taught is to understand, and the first thing is to actually take care of our heart and take care of our bodies and to reground, because without that skill your flight fight freeze response takes over, and that response physiologically actually shuts down the parts of your brain that allow you to empathize and learn. So there you are, all activated with no
Hmm.
capacity for empathy or learning, and just struggling to prove yourself a good person. And so such a simple skill can actually bring your brain back into a state where it can listen, learn something new. And the two don't have to be, you can be a very good person who made a mistake. As Ali keeps saying, this is a skill, and I really haven't given much practice about how to practice the skill. So of course I'll make mistakes. Now, one thing that I also feel strongly about is that in my unconscious state, when I, even if I don't try to do anything, there's no neutrality. I am trained within a white supremacist culture, and therefore chances are I'm going to act through those lenses. So I'm already making mistakes. I don't want to minimize mistakes. I'm going to
Hmm.
just do anything that comes to mind. I want to be thoughtful. But if we don't make mistakes and are willing to hear the feedback, then we're never growing and walking along that path.
And I think sometimes what's hard is that obviously nobody wants to make mistakes. We don't want to be racist. But when we're in that state of fight, flight, fear response, or agitation. We're upset. We're emotionally charged up. That can just make the situation just so much worse. How do you begin to ground yourself before you have these conversations? And I'm even thinking about even before someone watches a video on YouTube about race. How do you kind of mentally prepare yourself and ground yourself for something that might be hard to hear or hard to read?
Yeah, so the book has some interesting and very simple grounding exercises, but I'm going to talk about something that perhaps is a little bit more, a bit different, which is you mentioned, we don't want to be racist. So if I'm a white person entering a conversation about race, my biggest fear is that I'm going to be racist. So that's what I'm going to try to defend is my non-racistness, And so
Yeah, yeah.
that's called stereotype threat. The stereotype threat, right, is when we fear meeting a stereotype. So then my identity in this conversation, for example, my identity as a white person is big front and center. I'm not actually thinking much about being a cis woman. I'm really mostly thinking about being a white person because we're talking about race, right? And so now if I say some blunder, which I probably already have, and if I think about them, I'm thinking, oh my God, I have to now prove myself I'm a good person because I'm a white person. And I forget that I have lots of other identities. I'm a spiritual person. I'm a parent. I am a sister. I am a good friend. And so what happens when your stereotype threat is activated, which means when you're fearing meeting the stereotype of the white woman, for example, all my resources now are geared toward defending, proving the stereotype wrong and no longer having the conversation. So a very simple task that have very powerful effect is in this moment I'm going to remember, yes, and I'm also a parent, and I'm also a good friend, And I'm also somebody who loves to cook for neighbors, and I'm also somebody who loves to go into nature. There's a lot more to me. All of a sudden, all the other parts of me can actually hold that part that is having a little bit of a trouble figuring out how to exist in a way that feels right to that part of me.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Delgado Podcast. As always, you can get the show notes, video links, and resources mentioned in this episode on my blog at mikedelgado.org. You can also get updates to new shows and get access to the full archive of past shows by following the Delgado Podcast on YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. And if you ever have suggestions for future topics or guests you want to hear from on this show, please reach out. My email is delgado@ucla.edu. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll chat more next time.